How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. This one's going to be a good one. I enjoyed the last episode I spoke with him. I followed his content still. He's a returning guest. He's a great coach. He's an all-round top fella. Today I am joined by the one and only Ben Wright. How are you doing?
Good man. Way way too many compliments for me first thing in the morning. But yeah, it's all good, man.
Well,
Thank
that's
you.
it. If you don't have a coffee with you, that's what I'm here for to help
Yeah,
with
man.
them. I
Yeah.
know, obviously, caught up a little bit before we started recording. I've spoken a little bit, setting up this episode. Been a while since we last spoke, but I've still been seeing the content that you've been sharing, the work that you've been doing. But the first question: how are you? What's been kind of happening in your world since we last spoke?
Yeah, I think just like since we last spoke, I was pretty much more in the gym. I was doing a lot of in-gym stuff, but then had a toddler, he's 2.5 now. And when that happened, I was like, I can't be here 40 hours a week. I'm too old, man. I'm too old now to think about spending another 30 years on the planet and looking back and thinking I was just stuffed in a gym room for 40 hours a week, making loads of money and not able to then be present with the kids. So I actually took on a business coach. We transitioned a lot of the business over to an online platform. So now I'd say 75% of my clients are online. We built out the signature program, Complete Performance, which is kind of like the four pillars signature program. And then from there, had a baby, blah, blah, blah. And now just, yeah, spend a lot of time at home working on that, doing social media, yada, yada, yada. And then we've just had another newborn as well. So he's now 10 weeks old and just transitioning into that phase of life too. So currently running the in-person gym, the online company, 2.5-year-old, 10-week-old, and then my own health, and then all the other sort of cogs and wheels as well. So there's been quite a lot of transition since we last spoke, dude.
Yeah, and I know it kind of dives straight into the topics in mind because I do think from conversations that I've had, how I've um, uh, developed in terms of coaching, and like I say, conversations with clients that I've had, and you've listed quite a lot of things there in terms of changing business, life, trying to prioritize yourself as well. Would you
Yeah.
say that you have like a little bit of balance, or is it always because like people always say, "Oh yeah, you just need to balance things out," and what was that phrase? Everyone's got the same like 24 hours in the day, and those sorts of things. How have you kind of found from your own experience trying to, is it a case of when you're in podcast mode, for example, you're in podcast mode, I'm doing this, and then you transition to being a dad, you transition to being a partner, or is it kind of they're all kind of like flowing together? How have you? Because I
Yeah.
know for a lot of not well, even coaches listening, but clients listening as well, everyone has a lot of things going on, and it's kind of how do you balance that? If that all kind of makes sense, I realize it's quite broad.
Yeah, it's not at all, man. I think like I sit down every Sunday night and I'll do like a power week on my laptop essentially, and I just look at every hour across the week. Yeah, everyone's got 24 hours in the day, but not everyone's running a 5 hours kip and running on the same amount of sort of different tasks, right? So it's a case of like looking at everything needs to be a priority. I need to be focused on that one task. Like my partner's really good. She came in early with the baby and was like, "Baby, can you just hold the little one for a bit?" And I was like, sweetheart, I'm working right now. I will do the dad stuff, but if you don't let me do this now, when I am with him later, I'm thinking about doing this and I'm not thinking about being with him. So for me, it has to be very much segmented, like bang, 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 like this hour is here, this hour is here, this hour is here. Now, when I map that out on a weekly basis, which can fluctuate and be a little bit flexible week to week, of course, Mondays are going to be all about check-in services, speaking to the clients, TLC, all that kind of stuff. Tuesdays is very much a social media marketing day. Wednesdays is pretty much a full day in the gym. Thursday mornings in the gym, then I do some study, and then Thursday afternoons with my toddler, and then I back in the gym on Thursday evening. Fridays all kind of like wrapping up the week with social media, marketing, consultations, program design, speaking to the clients, all that kind of stuff if they want to book calls, and then running my own training in around that as well to make sure that it suits. So it has to be pretty well organized. And as soon as like you don't do that, like I can understand why people would struggle without that kind of structure. And when I speak to a lot of like dads and clients that are coming on these days, they have none of that. They're just literally running by the hour. What's next? What task is next? And then they just feel completely submerged in all of this stress because they don't have any system in place to do that. And honestly, 2 hours on a Sunday night just to do all my admin is a non-negotiable because it sets up that week ahead. And then I literally just like just batter in, bang, 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 bang. And if I can get to the end of the week and think, right, 75% of that went really well, I'm going to call that a good week. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose those 2 hours on a Sunday, it's kind of for a short term, I am trying to get used to that, but then long term, actually being all right, cool. Actually, I've got all of this time there. Two things that from what you've said from there, because you've just spoken there of this is how my system works. This is what works for you. Was there any kind of like teething problems in terms of getting to that point? Was it a case of were you always doing admin on a Sunday? Did you feel as though like you're already quite organized? Because sometimes from conversations that I've had with clients, they can be really organized in terms of their business, but then they don't then still have those organization skills when it comes to life. And then the second part, hopefully it'll tie in. And you kind of mentioned it before we started recording of, oh, I feel bad. I'm doing a podcast. I'm going into the bedroom. What's kind of your thought process on um maybe being a little bit selfish within that moment of I need to focus on this to then be able to, like what you mentioned, have your brain free to focus on, being with your kids, being with your partner, being present within the family and life sort of thing. So I know they're kind of like two topics there, but does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, ask me that first one again, and I'll give you that
So
one.
the first one is just the organization side of
Ah,
things.
yeah.
Have you
Yeah.
always been organized with that?
Okay.
Did you kind of,
I mean,
especially
yeah.
transitioning business, did that change or?
No, I've always been really like hypercritical about how I organize things. I've got a really high standard when it comes to like how I am quite a perfectionist when it comes to like how I micromanage things. But I would say over the last like 2.5 to 3 years, like that kind of like process of getting from where I was to getting to where I am now, it was pretty slow and steady. Like every couple months, we'd see a small shift, or now I need to add this in, now I need to take that out. And as the business became more online and it was less kind of in person, I'd be like, right, I can farm these clients. That's going to open up space here. That opens up space there. That means I can now add in this, yada yada yada. And actually, as we've had the newborn, I'm actually starting to take on more in-person clients. So I'm reverse engineering a little bit of this now to make sure that I get back in the gym because I really want to be doing more in person. So like it was a very gradual state of affairs. It was never like an overnight, right, bang, we need to do this because it just wouldn't have worked because there's just too many cogs and wheels at play for you to just be able to say, right, that needs to stop and this needs to start. Like honestly, it's like a chess game. Like when you're running like two different businesses, when you've got over 60 clients, when you've got your own training to do, you've got your own cardiovascular work to do, and then you've got all your own health stuff to do. Then you've got kids, a co-parenting set up with by toddler, like a full-time mother partnership here. It's like there's so many things to play with there, and it's like not trying to disrupt or put too much chaos in other people's lives, and then not start to see like your customer care go down to your own clients, whilst you're also looking at the onboarding side, and then learning social media marketing, all this kind of stuff as well, and not burning yourself out. And I think that was the hardest thing, was just figuring out a system that didn't leave me completely exhausted 24/7. And there was periods throughout that 2.5 years where I was up at like 5 a.m. I was going to bed and sleeping at like 11:30 p.m., like six,
Mhm.
7 days on the trot and running all these multiple tasks. And it got to the point where I was burning out, and then reevaluating and then having to look at how we start to like negotiate things to move into a better position. And then obviously with Andrea, on your second question, there's like just a really strong relationship. Like I am not 9 to 5 in an office getting paid by the man. I don't
Yeah.
get to just shut off. You know yourself, right? So, you know, when she's off work for 12 months now to be a full-time mom, she's like her salary is 50%, right? Um, that's a lot more on me. So she's
Mhm.
really, really affectionate when it comes to like, you need to do this. I need to give Ben the space to do these things. Otherwise, the lifestyle that we live and all the other things aren't going to be as good. So she does really give me that space. If I was working 9 to 5 in an office, I don't suppose it would matter so much because when you shut off, you shut off. And when you're
Yeah.
at work, you're at work, you know? Um, but the way that we work is like the engine has to keep going. So like there has to be a really strong relationship between two people so that when I am not working and I'm with her, it's completely present. And it's just love language stuff, dude. It's like I said to her the other week, what do you need me to do to help you? And she goes, honestly, just give me an hour a day of your time to go for a walk. Just maybe every second night you make dinner. If you could just take Leo 3 times a week so she can go back and train. I'm like, cool. So then I factored that in. She's getting what she needs. I'm getting what I need. Everyone's happy and we all move forward. You know what I mean? So it's just about listening to each other, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's important. I think sometimes, touching on that, it would be, being able, like what you said there, having that conversation. What can I do to help? Whereas I think sometimes, I think again, this might be a little bit of a tangent, but sometimes it's a case of people can take on a lot of things themselves and not kind of use that support network around them to either be like, look, I need to do this. Can you do this? But then also a case of like, actually, I need time to be able to do this. The only example I can kind of think of is when we moved over to Thailand. Obviously, I was transitioning, the clients that I had in person in the UK, onto online, plus trying to find a gym to work in. So I was just out most of the day, going training at different gyms, trying to, build connections and go from there. But then equally, Daniela is straight into teaching. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of, we kind of joke. I kind of like lived the dream for a couple of weeks, was going to gyms and chatting. But then equally, it's a case of she needed a rest as well because she'd taken on quite a lot of the responsibility. So it's like, okay, cool. These are things that I can do to kind of like manage that stress a little bit, but then allow us to still progress in that she can still have that quality of teaching in the school that she's at. I can still kind of, have those conversations. And then, it worked out that, I'm now in a gym and things are in a better position from there. But I see what you mean about, those things of having those conversations to be able to get that system. Um, on the topic of that system, for a lot of clients, and I've mentioned it quite a lot from conversations I've had, people who are business owners, parents, sometimes and you've mentioned it there, they're getting up really early, but then doing later nights, trying to cram in more. And I suppose this is something that, I've really enjoyed a lot of the content that you've shared about this. How do you kind of work with those clients to develop a system so that they can be, um, I don't know whether the best version of themselves is the right phrase, but the best version of themselves when they are in, business mode, when they are being a parent, and what kind of do you have to either restructure or take out or break down to be able to be like, look, this is actually how you're gonna feel better, perform better, and a couple of things that we've touched on there, actually being present in whatever task you need to be able to do.
Yeah, man. I think like a lot of it's just future processing. Most of the dads that I work with when they're not healthy, it's just like, there's a few things that I find a commonality with all of them is like they're terrible with their time. Like you say you can't do this or that, but you doom scroll every day. It's like I know myself, like I don't like getting up at 5 a.m. But I'll tell you this much. On a Monday, when I get up at 5 a.m., I am finished 60 check-ins by midday, which means that I've got the rest of my day to just go for my long run, hang out with the kids, and feel much more productive. If I slept in till 9 a.m., that wouldn't happen, right? So it's like time management is really critical. Like these guys that are like, okay, I get up at like 6 and then I'm working at 7:30 and then I get home at 8, but then I go home and then I don't want to leave and I can't get to the gym. It's like just go and train in the morning. Like I know it's tough. I know it's hard, but like it's just what you have to do. And then it's the prioritization around like their values, their beliefs. Like I honestly don't believe it's good enough for men these days. And I don't really like using children as leverage to say like, you should be doing this for your kids. You should be doing this for you. No, not at all. I think you need to do it for you. And the reason being is as a father, like 75% of your time spent with your child is before the age of 14.
Mm.
So out after that, it doesn't matter. So it's like, why don't do it for yourself? Because at some point your kid's gonna leave home. At some point your kid's gonna want less to do with you. I've been there. My kid's 22 years old. You know what I mean? I've got three. And it's like, and then what? So you've spent your whole time getting up at 5 a.m. and training for your kids to be a better father. But the reality is like they're gonna leave at some point anyway. And then what? You've not done it for yourself. Like you need to do it for yourself. And I just think for them, it's like understanding their values and recognizing like that future process of like if you start to just make a few changes now, how's that going to make you feel? How's that going to make you feel when you get your sex drive back properly? How's that going to make you feel when you're more present with your children? How's that going to make you feel when you're less like reactive to your wife when she says something? How's that going to make you feel? And it's really about like that communication. And I'm yet to see any man or dad who have like high responsibilities in business, lifestyle, kids, and that not start to feel really quick effects um, from doing things like removing alcohol, removing processed food, getting up earlier in the morning, being much more hyper productive first thing, being able to spend proper quality time on the weekends without having to chase their tail trying to get into the gym, stuff like that. And actually just giving themselves 2 to 3, 3 to 4 hours a week of time by themselves in a gym environment where they can just switch off and just get away from things. That impact of that is absolutely astronomical. And that isn't even about the kids, that's just about them. And I know for me, I'm super selfish. Like I prioritize my whole week around my training.
Yeah.
That's it. Like I will not let anything interfere with that. Kids, partnerships, nothing. Because I know that if I don't do that training, I am a really terrible human being. I'm snappy, I'm reactive, I'm grumpy. I start to feel like lower levels of self-worth. That then reflects onto other things like my business, my relationships, how I feel about myself. So I just see what are like the bolts and wheels of the things that really keep my headspace in check. And those things are non-negotiable. And then once we understand what they are for the client, we just say, right, these don't move. And as long as you can make them not move, you're going to get sensational results. And I just think I see a lot of that with men these days, dads especially, just their time management, how they spend their time, like their energy levels first thing in the morning. And then I think honestly, one that always flags up is their connection to their partner is through the floor. And
Yeah.
if we could start to fix a few of these things, everything else just starts to light up, you know?
Yeah, I know you said there, and we touched on it a little bit about being selfish when, prioritizing your training around there, but the outcome is has a positive impact on the rest of every other elements of your life. And I think sometimes the example that I'll use is on one conversation that sticks in mind. So the gym that I'm working at now is a fitness retreat. So there are
Yeah.
like locals in Phuket that'll come to the gym, but people will come over. Like we've had people come over for a week. We actually had an American guy come over for 4 months. He was just like, I'm going to work remotely. Going to come over 4 months. One conversation that sticks in my mind: an Aussie guy runs his own business in Australia. I can't remember if he was from Melbourne or Sydney, because there's a couple there's a couple from Sydney and Melbourne that come, and he'd only come over for like I think it was 5 or 6 days. Got chatting with him, and he was just kind of like, I try and have blocks of this. I know not everybody can be able to do something like this. We've spoken there about hours during a week to get to the gym, but what I found really interesting was that he'd been doing this for maybe the last year, 2 years, coming over for a week, just having a little bit of a reset, focusing it, just time away, and then he went back, and then he was straight back into right. This is what I'm doing with business. I'm present there, and sometimes just being able to take that time, not drinking, get involved with the classes, yes, being in the gym, but also kind of just getting outside and not having your phone out all the time, taking photographs. We do a Buddha run on a Wednesday, get up to the top, have a coconut, have a conversation. Like, it's really good. One of the things that you said there though was that roadblocks that people put in their way are, oh, I can't get up. I can't get up that early. That early, I need my sleep. All right, well, are you actually getting better quality sleep, or are you just working late into the night, and then that's what's impacting? With these roadblocks that you've had experience with the clients that you've worked with, are those I don't know whether excuses is the right phrase, or is there kind of like is it an excuse? Is it a fear of kind of like making a change and like kind of letting go and thinking, shit, if I don't work till late at night, I'm not getting enough done. If I get up earlier, am I then feeling as though I'm not resting enough? What's kind of your take on, those roadblocks that people put in place, and whether it's kind of, a story that they're just telling themselves, whereas actually the evidence, like the logical brain would say, oh, actually, it's going to create more time and you're going to be able to do X, Y, or Z later on in the day.
Yeah, I mean, I work with a whole bunch of like super successful men. Like I'm talking running some insane businesses, and they all say the same thing. Like there's a big difference between like utilizing your time and just productivity. You know what I mean? Like, why would you sit at your laptop at 9 o'clock at night when you're absolutely frazzled trying to get through a shit ton of admin when the reality is the productivity is low? Like if you were to just give yourself that space not to do it, and I used to do it myself, and just get up earlier when your productivity is probably higher. We know that after sleep, productivity is higher, your brain's rested, you've had your deep REM sleep, you've had your non-REM sleep as well, and like basically cognitively, you're in a really good position to sort of micromanage tasks at a much more efficient rate. So it's like just do these things first thing in the morning, you know. The other thing as well is like what you mentioned there is like fear with men. Something I notice a lot of is why do they have these repeatable things happening all the time, right? Why do they get stuck in their own head? It's because of familiarity, you know? So, where people get stressed out, stress creates like this fight or flight response. And with fight or flight response, like we're going to look for something familiar pretty quickly because it brings down that fear of what is subjectively creating that sort of stress at that time. And that comes in all different sort of shapes and sizes, you know yourself, like, you know, there's a fear on a hack squat when you're 25 reps in and your coach is like, give me three more. And you're like, I just want out. Yeah. There's like a fear in many different things, relationships, money, finances, and you run to this familiarity, don't you? And it's always, it doesn't mean it needs to be good, but sometimes I feel like just the future processing of things needs to be really important, like helping them understand how it's going to feel, what it's going to look like. Because you got these two roads. It's like, do the unfamiliar thing. It's scary. So subconsciously, your brain's already telling you you're not going to do it. Go back to what's familiar. It creates pain, but it's something that you already know, and it's something that comforts you at the time. Could be alcohol, could be poor food choice, could be pornography, could be what drugs, could be a number of different things, right? That go on in the background of a lot of men and dads' lives, which people don't want to talk about. But subsequently, when I speak to a lot of my clients, it's like, let's just try and future process things more often. Like, how do you want to feel in 6 months? What does that look like? What does that feel like? Put yourself in that position right now. Talk about how that would feel. We start to tap into the subconscious feedback loop. Like, it doesn't need to be scary. It doesn't need to be frightening. Actually, it can be exciting. And I think like what you're saying there is like these connection points, isolation, getting with men who are like super hyper busy. Like they've got businesses, they've got kids, they probably have a low social network at this point. They're probably like drinking alone on a Saturday night, getting a whiskey coming in for work because they're just tired. They feel isolated. They're potentially feeling a bit depressed. It's like when you get with these guys and you start to connect and you start to open up conversations and you start to like really bleed into like the health aspect, like they feel less isolated, they feel more connected, and then they feel more engaged to stay on top of your program. So I think for me, away from like the use of AI and you know you could get any program off ChatGPT now. Well, why do people need coaching? It's because less isolation, more connection, and actually more human contact is going to help them feel more like in tune with making better decisions because reflectively, like it's helping them feel more confident within themselves. So I think like spending more time with the men. I do a lot of like coffees with the guys, in-person workshops every month, even though it's a hybrid setup. I'll do like in-person immersives and I'll get them together. I'll go for runs with clients because like that really is the framework of what we need as men when it comes to our health is we need to really get into that first before any of the systemization around tracking food steps, you know, all that kind of stuff's ever going to make any sense. Because if their lives are already that busy, like you can't just tell them to do that because it's painful. And if it's painful, it's scary. And if it's scary, it creates stress. And if it's stressful, they'll go back to doing what they always do, which is familiar, you know. So I think a number, maybe that's a little bit off track what you're asking, but from my concept of coaching these days, that's a really important sort of framework to use, you know.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there in terms of, you know, where your mind goes in terms of coaching. You know, there's a lot of, you know, I had a conversation, was it last week? About ChatGPT, you know, you can put a program in there, but it's not based on that person. It's just kind of like a generic thing. What makes it specific to that person is the conversations that you're going to have around with that. Because like the program might be, you know, all the I's dotted, T's crossed might look perfect, but if they've got everything else going on in the background, there's a guy who used to train in Leeds, and he used to come in and train on his lunchtime, and bearing in mind the session was booked for an hour, but he was always running a little bit late because he was like high up in management. So people were always messaging him, always kind of like asking him questions. And it actually, at one point, I think we ended up just having like 30 minutes to be able to do something. And I was like, look, the guy was called Ian. I was like, look, it's funny you said about training on a morning. Can we just train on a morning? And we trained early enough that like nobody was going to be pestering him. And we managed to get like a full hour. And then afterwards, we would have like a coffee and then he would go and get on his day, as opposed to in that lunchtime. And it's interesting to hear your thoughts about, trying to cram everything in. That sometimes they'll think, right, well, I do need to do some form of fitness. I do need to do this, do need to that. But then for the training side of things, they'll just think that they're going to absolutely flog themselves and be like, oh, well, I'm not making any progress. So I may as well have that drink when I get home from work or X, Y, and Z. Whereas actually just changing that round a little bit, you mentioned in there, trying to take that stress away a little bit. All right, cool. You've got that out the way now. Right now you can concentrate on what you're doing from there. Do you think that's kind of um, where changing that for the individual, trying to focus on their mindset and just trying to, I don't know whether making things easier for them is, but just seeing how they tick, how their day is, because they've already got a million and one things to think about as business owners, as dads, and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, man. I think like if you can go on AI and get the most perfectly laid out plan built, then why don't you stick to it? Most people will never stick to it, and I think A, it's a trust thing, and B, it's just like this accountability thing. Like there's no one there chapping at your door telling you what to do, helping you make better decisions. I think like a lot of people, men will use coaching for critical thinking. It's like I've got so much going on, I don't want to have to think for myself. You need to think for me. But that requires a shit ton of trust, and I don't think people really have that level of trust right now with AI. Whereas they will have that level of trust with, Stephen, who's done 10 years in the coaching industry and has seen multiple different frameworks through multiple different lenses. Um, so it's just about understanding that and then asking, like, well, if you know what you need to do, why do you not do it? Like, honestly, if you know that you should train 3 days a week, that you should track your food, you should get yourself all these basics that people need to do to start getting their health back in check. If you're not doing it, why not? And it's just about understanding the why behind that. And that can be really difficult for a lot of people because I spoke to a client recently and he just will not lose fat. He's an amazing client. He's such a great client, but he runs a massive business. And the fat loss thing's a real stippler for him. And he talks about how, Ben, you have like quite a structured week. My week's very reactive. So there you go. It's like you have a reactive life, therefore your decisions become reactive. So like actually, how do you work within that framework? Does it actually work giving him a structured meal plan if he lives a reactive life? No, you can't have to work with that flow of water. So it's like, well, if you have a reactive life, we need to get a system in place that you can work with that is also reactive. So if you're going to be reactive eating, we need to make sure that that's done in such a fashion that still allows you to lose fat. And like alcohol is another one for a lot of guys. Like I just think they drink way too much. I haven't drank alcohol in many, many years now, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. And I just think, where we see low level diets, alcohol consumption, stuff like that, we just start to see a real carryover towards like gut health, testosterone levels, mental health, all this kind of stuff as well. So again, it's like looking at vices, like what kind of vices can we get out of your life? Like what are the things that we need to get out of your life quickly? I just put up a post on John Loudon, my client this week. He's like 55. He's dropped about 3 stone of fat. He's looking shredded. He's running up hills. He's training 3 days a week. He's doing conjugate. Like he's the fittest grandpa in his town. And it all started because he just stopped drinking alcohol. So for me, it was like such a great way to look at that through that lens and go, oh, that's sick, man. So we just had to take that out of your life and everything else changed. And you'll probably find like most of your clients are 2 to 3 vices away from having life-changing results.
Mm.
So I just don't think there's much point in telling them to like track the food and do this and do that until you really understand what they need to remove first to create space for them to be able to do these things. Um, and that can be really hard for a lot of people. And that's the difference between coaching and that's the difference between AI. Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah,
AI is
absolutely.
probably, you know?
The key word that you said there was understand. If you don't understand, how can you? I mean, that's not to say it's going to be, you can understand every situation, but, gather that information to be like, all right, okay, now I can see what's happening here. And then you can try and add in solutions to that person there. I also love the fact that he's got the title, the fittest granddad in his village, which is yeah, really
Yeah.
cool. I had a guy who was originally from Barbados, and yeah, his goal was to still keep surfing until his 90s. I think at the time I was training him, he was in his late 40s, early 50s, and yeah, to be able to do that, as we get older, yeah, I think that's a only fills you with confidence to be able to be like, yeah, do you know what, actually I am feeling good. I can be able to do this rather than, you know, again, maybe a little bit of a tangent, but feeling as though things should be restrictive. It's a little bit like, no, actually, I can do this at this age, or this age. Um, one thing I wanted to touch on there, and we've kind of spoken about, when people are busy, a lot of things going on, trying to change things and progress. You've mentioned, a couple of your clients there losing weight, running up hills, all that sort of stuff. But you also mentioned earlier about with yourself in terms of getting to a point where there was an element of burnout. And sometimes going back to the roadblocks that we mentioned, it can take time for people to change. And is it a case of and rock bottom can be very different for different people. That meaning is going to be different, but then also health scares. You know, does it have to get to a point for men to get to that point to be like something needs to change, or is it a case of, are you seeing more of a trend now of people wanting to get ahead of that and be like, actually, I don't want to get to that point, if that makes sense? Because sometimes,
Mm.
it gets that thing of like, I need to change, but they don't know how, and they go further and further down this rabbit hole to be like, they're forced into, like you have to change rather than kind of like being a little bit preemptive of it. I hope that kind of
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. There's so many different ways to look at that. Like if you look at Paul Check, for example, an old mentor of mine, it's like he will talk about the pain doctor. You don't want the pain doctor chapping at your door. Like you don't want to leave it too late for like that to happen, and rightly so. Like you don't want to get obesity. You don't want to get like diabetes to then have to lose fat. All these kind of things. But there's also this part of me that's like this stoicism aspect of like we should suffer to change. Like we need to suffer a bit to change, and I don't think people suffer enough in life. And I don't know, when we look at self-suffering, it's like, what can we add into our life to suffer a little bit more? Is it a cold shower in the morning? Is it training? Is it running? Doing things you dislike? Is it actually like having habits in your life that are subjectively like quite uncomfortable? But it forces you in a position of discomfort because you know it's going to give you this adaptation down the line. Like these are ways to look at it, but I don't ever think like it's good for people to get so out of shape that they're in this critical situation where now they have to change. I think that's really complacent. Um, but there's also this thing, and it's like just what was I going to say there? Oh man, it's gone from my head there. It's very much like people don't, yeah, they don't like want to suffer. I just feel like the world we live in, oh, that's it. Many dads these days are getting older. Okay, so like a lot of men are living longer, which means that they're having kids very much later in life. So I've just had, I've got a 22-year-old, a 2.5-year-old, and a 10-week-old baby. Every single one of them has been incredibly different in its own way. Being a 45, 46 this year, right, year old father, is so much harder. Like it's so much harder. Like it really reminds you, like even being super fit and healthy, like how much harder it is. So I can only imagine how that feels for a lot of guys, 35 to 40, 45 to 50, who are having more kids these days because like that's just the way life is working out, right? And then that is the thing that's reminding you how out of shape you are because you're like, wow, I had no idea how unfit and unhealthy I was until I had my next kid. Because it's reminding them like you don't get to do that stuff anymore. You don't get to have a hangover. You don't get to, stay up till midnight watching Netflix, then have to get up at 4 a.m. for a feed. You don't get to do these things anymore. So it's a real constraint for them. And it can be really difficult because there's this bleed into like identity shift. Like very much an old part of that person needs to die a little to then be able to create space for this new person to exist. And I think that part there is where we see a lot of like postnatal depression in men, depression in general, midlife crises, stuff like that. And I've certainly experienced that myself over the last 3 months. Happy to touch on that if you want, but it's like I do notice the similarities with a lot of men now. I don't think anyone should wait that long. I do think it's really complacent that you've let yourself get so out of whack, and then you've decided to have a kid, and now that's the reminder of how bad you are. Like if you'd have just kept things in check during that time, you'd have given yourself the opportunity to feel like a much better father without less guilt, because now you just feel guilty that you're tired, you're snappy, you're reactive, you've got more vices, you can't cope with the child, they start crying, you start snapping. Do you see what I mean? It's like, had you just looked after yourself, like that wouldn't have been happening right now. And that's kind of where I'm trying to work with a lot of men right now. I've got a little side project called Rebuilding the Man. And it's really just speaking to dads to try and see where they're struggling. And a lot of it just comes back to this identity shift. Um, who you used to be to who you need to be now. And they just don't want to let go because it's so fucking painful, you know? And within that framework, it's just about helping them understand what they need to do now to simplify that process to become better fathers, essentially. So that's kind of my thought process on that, I guess.
Yeah. Do you think with that, just diving into that a little bit more, because again, similar conversations about I identity, if when things change, it's like, whoa, hang on a minute, what do you mean I can't do this, or I have to do this now. Do you think that's kind of um a natural thought process to have, and it's kind of how you manage that thought process to be like, all right, okay, so rather than over here I'm this, it's actually reframing it to be like, no, I'm this, so I can do X, Y, or Z. Like, do you think that thought process of actually like, oh wow, what do you mean I can't do this, and that has to be like a turning point, but it's maybe the length of that turning point for people, for men to realize, oh no, wait, actually, yeah, I can't keep doing I can't keep doing this.
Yeah, 100%. I just honestly think that there's just not enough preparation for men these days going into fatherhood, man. It's outrageous. Like, I am actually potentially thinking about even becoming some kind of like birth guide for men, or
Mm.
in many ways having three different births with three different ways of doing it, from home births, free births, the hospital births, to seeing different lenses of like how we should be doing things. Because even for me, it's a shock to the system, dude. Like, I just don't think men are really that prepared. You go from having the world's best relationship to being number one, sleeping in bed every night, to just becoming nothing. You see, like this child appears and then suddenly you're nothing. You're like, you're working harder for less. You're not got any intimacy with your partner because she's exhausted, she's tired. The child takes up every last minute of your day. You're sleeping on the couch and you have nothing. Like that is so difficult for men to sort of to understand. And that turning point doesn't happen overnight. You've got like 9 months of like being with the partner. Then you have like that exciting part of having the baby. And then overnight, bang. As soon as that baby gets home from hospital, your life changes immediately. And there's no prep for that. There's no prep for that. And there's no prep for that because every environment's different. Every relationship's different. So then how do you navigate that? And men will hold on to their old identity for years. Good men will just be like, right, I need to change now because I just don't know if I can cope in this environment. And the main things that are important to me is being a good father, being a good partner, and getting things to reestablish and look at the new life we have, the new relationships we have, and actually just being excited about that. But they hold on to that old part of them. Well, wait a minute, like I was able to go to the cinema every Saturday night with my missus. We were able to go out for a glass of wine on a Friday night. I was able to do this, and nothing, and none of that exists. And it's a real bottleneck and it's a constraint for men. It's terrifying because it could be really depressing for a lot of dudes. And like even I felt it myself. For example, we moved flat. So we moved flat in the March and I invested I've spent about 100 grand this year on between tax bills, moving properties, business investments, all this stuff. Doing all of that to create a space for my children to have the best schools in Glasgow, in the most amazing part of Glasgow we're living in right now. We've got a brand new apartment. I should be so happy, but it was like all of this, doing the birthing, and now I'm sleeping on the couch. And it's like I barely get to give her a handhold, let alone anything else. And it was really humbling. And it was a real brutal reminder of how that can affect men's health. And then like that leads them down the rabbit hole of just eating more for comfort, not doing their training, using that as an excuse, loss of identity, midlife crisis. Now imagine doing that when you're 20, which is cool. You just have to get used to it when you're far more robust and less emotional, to doing that when you're in your 40s, when you've created this lifestyle for yourself that you love, to then having to like you've almost taken that away yourself through fatherhood again and expecting things to be the same. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So like the men that I'm working with now, it's like this goes way beyond calorie counting and anything else. This goes right deep rooted, like you're fucked right now. Like, and it's nothing to do with your health. It's got everything to do with who you thought you were, who you now need to be. And that transition's painful. And you're gonna have to accept it, or you're gonna have to just keep doing what you're doing, which is gonna lead down a garden path of even worse outcomes because you're just gonna keep getting more unhealthy. And from that, you will see your relationship dissipate. You will be the father you never wanted to be to your kids, and they will grow up seeing a reactive dad, an unhealthy dad, a dad that doesn't do as he says he's going to do. And then how do you think that's going to reflect into their lives moving forward as well? So it really is, I would say, a pandemic these days, man, in terms of like the men's side of it. And I'm really just trying to make things a bit easier for men. One last thing on that is I put out a social media post probably 6 weeks ago. It got 300,000 views organically, 500 follows, over 1,000 reshares, 2,000 likes, 300 comments. It was about men's postpartum emotions after babies are born. It opened up a web of conversations, which led me to rebuilding the Rebuild Demand WhatsApp group, which has got 40 guys in there right now from all over the world talking about fatherhood.
Yeah.
Like that's where it's at, you know what I mean? It's like so like that's just a fraction of where it's at because if this doesn't get fixed, our future children don't get fixed and the wives have to suffer and they shouldn't suffer because they're already challenged enough with being new mothers, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's kind of where I see a lot of things happening right now
Yeah.
with the way things are with men.
Yeah, no, I think there was a good cycle explanation of the cycle of that. It's a little bit like what we said, right? It's about so at the start of the chat, what systems do you need to put in place? Whereas actually, I think that thought process of I just need the best training program, I just need the best calorie program, I just need to do this, I just need to do that. Whereas actually, the mindset around things, kind of the internal work, if you like. I can't think of the right word on that to be able to go from there. And especially as I have friends who are having like kids now, some who have like taken on board to be like, look, I need to be the best that I can, and trying to implement these systems. Some that are kind of like, just splashing around, panicking, thinking, "Oh God, what's going to happen?" For myself, I actually get married next month, so then at some point we're going to be thinking about having a kid and progressing from there. And I
Yeah.
think these are thoughts where everything that you say in there, it's like, yeah, that does make sense. And especially from being over here in Thailand and speaking to people from a much, I mean, don't get me wrong, I spoke to quite a lot of different people in the UK, but it was just different walks of life within that one country. You then spread it out a little bit and see what other people, like what you're saying about the WhatsApp group there, people all over the world. Sometimes there are those similar mindsets of like, oh no, like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm coming up because especially I mentioned about the Aussie guy that came over using it as a reset. On the flip side, there are plenty of guys that come over who, want to train hard during the week and then absolutely just blow it all and go over to Patong and,
Yeah.
drink on a weekend. But then they're just in that cycle of like, they never change, they never progress, they never feel good. They just kind of punish themselves in the gym, punishing themselves with alcohol and whatever else it may be, and then not actually getting to the root of everything. And maybe be good to hear your thoughts, accepting that what they're doing right now just isn't where they should be in their journey of life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, if you take everyone's vices away from them, they're just left with themselves. That's terrifying for a lot of people.
Mm.
Like you're not allowed to drink, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. Your wife's sleeping, you're not allowed to sit in the lounge watching porn, all these kind of things that go on in men's lives, right? And it's like it's terrifying for them. It's like you say, like, you want to be like training hard all week and then a weekend warrior. It doesn't work. Like, in the older you get, it doesn't work. Like, at some point, you've just got to sit with yourself and just be like, who am I? And that's really difficult for a lot of guys because you look at, who was it? Alan Watts said, kids grow up, get born, they go to school. Everything in life is a layer. First thing, you're born, you got to walk, you crawl, walk, then the next stage, then you go to kindergarten, then you go here, then you go here, you go in the secondary school, university, job, blah, 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 blah. And you go through that phase of life up until you're about 40. And you get to that point when you're 40 and you're like, what have I been doing? Like, what have I been doing? And then you have a kid. And then that kid reflects back to you all of the shit you hate about yourself. And then it's like, now you take those vices away, what are you left with? And that's like, I think for me, that's like a real tipping point for a lot of guys. If they could just sit with that. And I try to teach a lot of my male clients, like, just sit with yourself. Like, if you've got an eating issue, go and give yourself a 48-hour fast. Not because you're going to lose fat or because it's going to be hormonally good for you, whatever science is out there. Just, I want you to step away from that thing for 48 hours and just sit with yourself and see how that feels. Like, go and do 6 weeks without any alcohol, see how that feels. Go
Yeah.
and do 6 weeks with no processed food and see how that feels. And I've done it. And you end up just sitting with yourself and thinking, all right, I've got to deal with this thing. And when you can start to sit with that and you can find other ways of dealing with it, things become a lot more lucrative and they become a lot more fruitful for you because you're not just tapping into vices because you're reactive or stressed out over one or two little things. And I just think if people were more able to just sit with themselves just a little bit, and I like to call it pit stops in the day, 2 to 3 times a day, set your phone up for 10 minutes and just sit in silence and just let yourself sit with your eyes shut and just tap into how you're feeling. But people don't do enough of this because they're just react, react, react until they go to bed, get back up and do it again. Coaches like yourself and I are so much better at not doing that because it's our job to be more in tune with our health, right? So we know, like, if we take pit stops every day, like maybe you come off this call and like, right, I had a good chat with Ben for an hour. I'm just going to take 10 minutes to myself now, do nothing before the next task begins. Like, life's so much easier to micromanage. You're probably not likely to sit down tonight, Stephen, and like have 4 pints of beer because you're like, I don't need it, and you're also doing
Yeah.
something that you love. But it's like, I just think a lot of guys out there, they don't like their lives, they don't like their jobs, they don't like the way they look, they're hyper reactive, they don't take enough time to sit with themselves, they live unconsciously, and yeah, it's just a waste of a life, man. It's a waste of a life, and then your kids have got to watch that, and your wife she has to watch you suffer and fall apart, and then that reflects on everything else.
Yeah, I think from there, like what you're saying, taking that time, I think that's something that I've probably lent into a lot more since I think it'll be, well, yeah, it will be coming up a year being over here and like um, getting up to watch, not to be kind of like too, paying or looking through rose tinted glasses, but getting up watching the sunrise. Obviously, I'm mainly as well. It's a lot quieter on the road, so I'm getting a bit confident using the
Yeah.
scooter. But we went out, saw the sun come up, went to the beach, looking at the sunset, just having time where like, and I'm not saying it always has to be that. Obviously, I'm lucky enough to not be too far away from the beach, but we've even said about the Buddha run, going up the hill from there, and just kind of having that time. Even sometimes it's just a case of you won't be able to see the sun's gone down now, but even just sitting and being like, actually, having some time with your thoughts. Whereas I think a lot of people want, and that's something when we spoke about earlier about the roadblocks and the story that people tell themselves. Everything's just kind of distraction, doom scrolling on the phone, having a drink, and that sort of stuff. And I must admit, a lot of times you've mentioned about alcohol, which I think is quite a big one for a lot of people. I've hardly drank since being over in Thailand. We had a couple of drinks. It was like the end of the school year for Daniela's school. They've got this week, and then next week. But it's a case of like, yeah, you can still enjoy that, but it's just controlling those vices, like what you've mentioned, rather than being like. And I'm sure you've either experienced this. I know I have, and I've definitely had friends like that who, once they have that little taste, if you like, it's then, oh no, that's it. Then there's a downward spiral from there. Um, quite a lot of topics in there, a lot of tangents, more so on the coaching mindset of things. But that's exactly what I wanted to talk about, and kind of share your thoughts with the listeners. But for everyone listening, the last question I like to ask is, what would be your take home points or words of wisdom from what we've spoken about today, Ben?
Yeah, I think you touched on it there, man. It's like just being a bit more present. Like I had a client say to me the other week, he was Ben, like you need to slow down, man. He's like, you've been riding the crest of this wave for the last 3 years. You've been building, 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 and you keep building, and now things have slowed down. You're uncomfortable. He goes, but you're just sitting on the base of this wave again now, and you need to just enjoy that. You need to just enjoy the fact. He goes, can you honestly run the same business right now with a newborn? And I'm like, no. He goes, there you go. So like, if you can't do it, don't try to do it. And say I think we just need to spend a little bit more time just sitting on the base of that wave and not expecting ourselves to always be on the crest of it, just winning because it's impossible. And I think that space between those waves is like where a lot of the magic happens. You start to figure out who you are, what you want, where things are going. You get more creative. You can think clearly. You're going to start to assess things about yourself that maybe you're not comfortable with. But in the reality of that, like yourself, it's just about taking those moments to just sit down and just smell the roses and think like this isn't going to last forever. So why am I putting so much pressure on myself to be something that potentially I might not want to be in 5 or 6 years time? And
Yeah.
that will change. Like actually being a little bit more present between those waves. And I liked his analogy. So I was like, yeah, man, you just need to visualize I'm not on that crest right now, and that's okay. I don't need to be because the next one will come eventually, and however long that takes, just waiting for that perfect wave.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of analogy anyway, but yeah, I
Mm.
really like that because um, I do think a lot of people will be like, yeah, I want to do this, I want to do that. And interesting, you said there about, doing, can you run the same business as what you're doing now? And people will, again, like we touched on earlier, will try and pour more in, whereas they just don't have the capacity to be able to do that. And I think actually saying sometimes I can't do that right now, but yeah, waiting for the next wave, if you like, yeah, is kind of like not a bad way to think about it. You're not doing a disservice to yourself because you're still where you want to be, and then being able to take that next opportunity or next step when everything's in the right place, rather than like what we've mentioned all the way through this chat, just going in that cycle of just wearing yourself out. I was really looking forward to chatting with you, Ben. Really, really enjoyed that chat today. For
Good.
everyone listening who might have any questions about what we've spoken about today, want to reach out to you, see the content that you share, where could people find you or reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. It's ben.wright.4pillars. There you go. Yeah, anytime, man. You'll see my page with the 4 lines for my business. Complete Performance is the program, and the next new little venture is Rebuilding the Man. Get that off its feet. That should be the next wave.
Awesome, nice. I like that. Good, nice little tied in there with a wave analogy as well. I like it.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate that, dude.
But yeah, really, really appreciate taking the time to jump on. Like I say, enjoyed chatting with you the first time. It was great to catch up today. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will catch you all at the next episode.